Hello everyone,
Hello.
this is Wendy.
And this is Luke, but you already know that.
Probably already know Wendy, I don't know. Welcome, so we're at Wendy's.
We're in the forest.
We're in the forest, yeah, look at us in the new forest. Wendy's brand new space in Gosport High Street. I'm going to get you to introduce yourself, but actually, why don't you just introduce your space first? Tell us about it, what are we doing here?
So this is, it's changed. Initially I wanted to come to Gosport and open a sort of a healthy living cafe with an emphasis on metabolic health, low carb nutrition. And I still want to do that, but because I'm not a chef, I'm a herbalist, if you didn't know, I was getting really quite nervous about the whole idea of opening a catering establishment and not knowing anything about it. So I kind of had a download after there was a few things that were going wrong with the building. It's a Georgian building. It's a lovely building, but it is very old. So the nature of having old buildings is that the drains blocked, the windows leaked, the roof was leaking, we had black mould. So yeah, it's been a journey, and because of that journey I have now had a download to open the space up as a student herbal medicine clinic. So we will be offering free consultations for patients who are under the understanding that they'll be having their consultation taken by a medical herbalist student, but overseen by myself or another qualified medical herbalist. There will be a herbal dispensary here, and they will pay for their herbal medicine, but essentially their consultations will be free. We still will have a little bit of a cafe, more of like a tea bar.
Oh, I like that concept, a tea bar.
Yeah, like a proper tea, loose leaf tea.
We just had some of that, didn't we?
Yeah, we had some lovely green tea, which is really, really special. But coffee, tea, and maybe some low carb, sugar-free keto cakes, and very basic snacks.
I like it.
Thank you.
So we were just talking about this. The challenges, we can talk about whatever we want. We're going off piste a little, but the challenges of having commercial premises, which, I've had lots of challenges with that. But then the evolution of that, I think, is the important part. So, you started this with that ambition of, being a kombucha cafe, effectively, right? And so, but you had that download, and I love that because the universe is always course correcting me.
Well, interestingly, the name. So I always loved the concept of having what's called a temperance bar. And the temperance movement is a Christian movement that was sort of around in the early sort of 1800s, 1900s. And it was basically against alcohol. Because before that, clean water wasn't readily available, so everybody drank beer, gin, and there were some quite awful accidents that happened in the workhouses with children getting stuck drunk in machines, really nasty stuff. So the temperance movement was kind of a response to that, and so temperance bars were places, cafes where you would go that served non-alcoholic herbal drinks, herbal teas, root beers, but it was non-alcohol. And I've always loved the name Temperance.
Oh, it's nice. It's a tarot card.
It's a tarot card. So when I was trying to write up some blurb about temperance and, why I've called it that, I was looking up some on YouTube, some sort of like tarot card readers talking about the temperance card. And I realised that this was a whole lesson for me in patience. And one of the readers said that, you can't rush nature and that everything will happen in its own time. And I just couldn't believe that. I thought, wow, this is a lesson for me. Not me producing this temperance bar. This is the temperance teaching me basically patience, which doesn't come easy.
No, that's really interesting, because just as humans in general, we're kind of conditioned to do and to go and, you know, to have goals and to achieve and everything else. And it's not that stuff is wrong, but I don't remember ever being taught patience.
No. And it's true, isn't it? Like, you can't rush a seed to grow. You can't rush a tree. You know, there's that famous sort of saying that if you plant an apple tree, you're planting it for your grandchildren. Well, we don't have that mindset, do we?
There's another saying similar to that, which is something like the wise man plants the tree knowing that he'll never bask in its shade, or something like that.
Yeah.
I like that.
Oh, and that's another point, actually. I've shown Luke the garden, but it's got an amazing garden here, hasn't it?
Oh, yeah, it's a beautiful garden. And make it into a big herb garden.
Yes. And it's a walled garden. I mean, you'd never expect it, because we're right on Gosport High Street here. So you just really wouldn't expect to have this huge walled garden out the back, but it really is an amazing...
It's huge.
It is.
It's quite special.
And I don't know if you ever read The Secret Garden when you were a child or watched the movie, but I loved that book.
So you manifested this effectively.
Yeah, I think I did. 'Cause I absolutely loved that book, and I read it again as an adult, and there's a lot of spiritual lessons actually in The Secret Garden that you miss as a child. But when I reread it, so I've always wanted a walled garden. And we should be able to grow quite a lot of exotic type herbs in the garden, because the walls will obviously keep it more sheltered. The sun that bakes on the walls will keep the heat up.
It's a real sun trap. It's nice. To come see it.
Yes, when we're open. Yeah. Yes, which I don't know when we're going to be open.
All in divine timing, right?
Absolutely. Remain patient.
Yeah. So Wendy, as you know, is coming to talk to us on Friday for our Fareham Positive Living group. I'm so delighted, because if you know anything about me, I've been banging on about Wendy for years. Because she just had such a huge impact on my health and well-being. She was a recommend from a friend, so Lisa Maniatis, who you may know as a yoga teacher, said, maybe you should go visit my friend Wendy. And then now she's my friend Wendy. And here we are. And for your Friday session, I just said to you, we've had the most pre-bookings for the event that I've ever had for any event.
Oh, I'm so pleased.
I'm
honoured to be asked to come, and I really would love to get into the community. Sort of, obviously, I'm from Southsea, which isn't far at all, but it seems almost a world away when
it's overseas.
It's overseas, yes.
You take the ferry. So what? Like, you're talking about Western herbal medicine. Yes. Let's just talk about that. I'm intrigued by the term Western. So how does it differ from Eastern herbal medicine, as an example? What's the difference?
So there are the major traditions in herbal medicine that you will have heard of would be TCM, so traditional Chinese medicine, and of course Ayurveda, which is the traditional Indian form of, it's the science of life, which includes yoga, breathwork, meditation, but also herbal medicine. Most people are completely unaware that we have a Western tradition. The Western tradition is what we call the humoral tradition, and it's very, very similar. It's more similar than different to both of the traditions that you would have heard of, TCM and Ayurveda. All of those traditions work on the premise of vitality. The inner spirit, prana, chi, energy, or in Western tradition we call it ether, which essentially means spirit. And the balancing of, in Western tradition, the humours in Ayurveda, it would be the dosha, and in TCM, it would be the 5 elements. And essentially, all of the traditions believe that we need to maintain the perfect balance of all of these elements within the body, and an unbalance in these elements would cause dis-ease.
I remember the very first time I heard someone say dis-ease, it almost blew my mind. So I was like, oh, you just think disease. But actually, when you break it down, I think there's a real importance in that separation of the words dis and ease, because I just don't think that, if we look at Western medicine, not Western herbal medicine, we don't talk enough about how we come to this place of dis-ease. We don't often look at prevention. We tend to only look at, a response to something like a cure or a drug that's going to, take the symptoms away. But I guess what I love about what you do, Wendy, and why I really resonated and had such successful results is because you scale it right back to, okay, but how are you treating your body? How are you feeding your body? What's going on in your life? Where are your stresses? It's really the true definition of holistic. And so talk to me about how you approach things. If someone comes to you and says, I don't know, I get headaches. How do you approach that is different to what we would experience through just Western medicine?
So first of all, it would really depend if you're male or female.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a female, you'd be asking whether the headaches were cyclical, so whether there was a connection with your menstrual cycle. Are you getting headaches, say, the week prior to your period or when you're on your period? That can tell you a lot. And maybe there's a hormonal imbalance. If you're a man, that's not to say that you can't have hormonal imbalances, but women's hormones are definitely more complicated. I think women in general are just more complicated.
I have 2 daughters, I know, yeah.
So that would be the start. Are you male or female? Also, stress levels, emotional triggers, food triggers, are these headaches at the front or at the back? Are they pressing in nature? Are they stabbing? The character of the pain. Are you dehydrated? I mean, that is such a simple thing to look at with people that suffer with headaches, but actually a huge amount of headaches are due to dehydration. So you need to take a full medical consultation. So you'll be asking your patient all of these questions. When did they start? What makes them worse? What makes them better? For example, some headaches can feel better with cold. Some headaches feel better with heat. And that would tell the herbalist quite a lot about what herbs you would use in the preparation that you would make for your patient. But every patient essentially would have a different prescription. So if I had 10 people come to me with headaches, let's say stress headaches, there would most likely be 10 different prescriptions, because I'm not treating headache, I'm treating you, the patient.
Oh yeah, I love that, because traditionally speaking, from what we're used to through society, is that we have a headache, well, here's some painkillers.
Yeah.
And they might work for a percentage of people, but not. I mean, for me, they don't touch it if I've got a headache. So it's really interesting that you're talking about treating the person, not treating the symptom.
Yeah, 100%. Because we don't treat diseases, we treat people. And often I found, I've been a herbalist now, God, it must be coming up for 20 years. And I believe really strongly, because I've seen it, that most dis-ease starts from an emotional cause. An emotional cause that hasn't been met, or an emotional need that hasn't been met, or trauma, And the body, if you don't deal with the emotion, your body holds the score. I don't know if you've read that book, The Body Holds the Score, but it's I can't remember the author now, but it's a really good book about how your body can manifest illness through an emotional need not being met. Quite deep. We're going quite deep down
my mind's
today.
a bit blown. There's so much in that you wouldn't get from going to a GP, right? When have you ever had that conversation with a GP or a pharmacist or anybody else? And I'm not saying that, you know, GPs and pharmacists aren't valid forms of people to go to for treatment or valid professionals, but it's a totally different approach. So my perspective is that if I just talk about, what's that going on in the background? Do you see that?
What is that?
I don't know.
We've got fireworks.
We've got fireworks.
We've got fireworks.
They were nice. What was that about? I like those.
I have no idea.
Hopefully everyone else saw them and not just us. Maybe what was in that tea? So if I just talk about my journey with Wendy, I just couldn't get anywhere with the current Western medical system. Nowhere. And my dad had all of the similar things that I had wrong with me. And then so I kind of went to you through desperation.
Most people do.
Yeah.
Most people
Like, I'll just
do.
give it a try. But actually, even just the consultation I had with you felt like therapy in itself. And just that aspect of being able to talk about, you know, trauma and issues that are going on and have a conversation in itself just released enough to make a change. Then on top of that, we then started treating through dietary requirements for me, and then through the tinctures that you make, the actual herbal medicine. And I mean, you saw I turned around pretty quickly. You know, through years and years of...
You were really dedicated, and to be honest, most patients come through desperation. And you have to be pretty desperate to make the dietary modifications sometimes that I am going to recommend, because they can be quite restrictive. So a lot of people aren't prepared to make those changes. And I often say now, I think it's on my website, it certainly is somewhere, if you're prepared to give up the issues that created your illness, then I can work with you. If you're not prepared to change your lifestyle, don't come to me, because herbs on their own are fantastic, but they won't get to the root cause.
It's not the whole picture, is it? Again, it's a holistic, it's everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So the very first thing I did with Wendy was go gluten-free. And so for years, I was like, I've tried gluten-free, it doesn't work. And that's because I tried it at like 70, 80% gluten-free. I'd have the cheat on the weekend, or a little bit won't hurt. But what Wendy taught me was that it takes 3 months for gluten to pass through your system. So if you have one cheat, you have to start from scratch again and go again for 3 months, you know? So once I'd done those 3 months 100% gluten-free, I lost all cravings for anything of that kind. And I've been 100% ever since. I've never had a cheat. I've never had a single cheat. I've had accidents, genuine accidents.
And what did you notice?
Instant vomiting.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. Pretty much, I say instant, sorry, more about, you know, then I go to bed and then I have the vomiting.
Right.
So within, you know, a few hours of
Interesting.
That. Yeah.
And the thing is, Luke, if you'd have gone to your GP and asked for a test, it would have come back negative.
Yeah.
Because you're probably not a celiac.
No, so you called me a non-medical celiac, I think were the terms that you used, which was really validating, because I always thought, well, there's nothing wrong with me. The doctor says there's nothing wrong with me, but what's wrong with me?
Okay. Yeah, we would say you're a non-gluten sensitive, which means that you're not allergic in the sense that you're a celiac, which means that you don't have the ability to absorb gluten, and actually the gluten gets rid of the cells in your gut that look like little fingers, which are called villi. Celiacs don't have any of that. So you probably are a sensitive, but you would only know that by cutting it out completely, so that your gut could heal to the point where you were able to absorb nutrients sufficiently.
Yeah, and actually that was really interesting to the point about healing. So cutting it out is one thing, but then there's still work to do to rebuild the system. And you know, it's not just a one thing fixes all. You know, it's always going to be a combination of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think diet is key. And I think the modern world, we have so many more autoimmune diseases. That's what I tend to see in my practice. Allergies, sensitivities, chemical sensitivities, autoimmune diseases like rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, psoriasis. They really seem to be on the rise. And the question we've got to ask is, well, why? Why is that?
So sometimes I think, is it because we know more now, so we diagnose more? Or the other part of me, and this is what I think the truth is, and correct me as to what you believe, but we pretty much live off processed foods. Everything that we eat is processed. Traditionally, we would buy a loaf of bread from the baker. It would have been made by the baker, and probably, I don't know how many ingredients a loaf of bread has, but let's say 3, right? But if you buy a loaf of bread from the supermarket, you're probably looking at a minimum of 15 ingredients, if not more. Conditioners,
flours, bleaches.
Yeah.
They put stuff, do you know, I can't pronounce it, but there is, and I'm not sure that we have it in the UK, but certainly in America, they have a compound that's put in their bread to keep it soft. And it's the same as what they put into yoga mats.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
wow.
to keep them soft. I mean, and yeah, you talk about the traditional bread that you would have bought from a baker. How many days would that last without going mouldy?
Yeah, a couple, right?
Yeah. And it would go hard.
So when I lived in the States, I had a loaf of bread. Well, granted, I kept it in the fridge, but I swear to God, it was in there for months. At least 3 months it was in there, and it was totally fine, fresh as the day I bought it. But it tastes like cake, to be fair.
Well, yeah, because they probably have a lot of sugar.
Yeah, but you'll notice that our food is, I feel, starting to go that way as well. I think a lot, you know, most of the stuff we buy, whether we realise or not, is processed. Even if you buy a pint of milk, you know, it's been through a process before it's got in that bottle. How long ago was it last in that cow? Even oat milk, I bang on about this quite a lot. You know, you look at a bottle of oat milk and there's like 15 ingredients in it. And I think actually, if you get a cow's milk, you've got 1 ingredient. So again, it's about looking at what we buy and recognising how processed the things that we have are. The things that we are told are good for us, actually, if they've got ingredients in that you don't know how to spell or never heard of the name, you know, do we really want to be putting that in our body? And I think that that's where all this dis-ease is coming from. I think the fact that probably 90% of stuff that we eat is actually processed, even if it's a fresh fruit or vegetable off the shelves. Has it been bleached? Has it been used pesticides on it? You know, how long has it been cold stored? Things like that.
And there's that coating, is it Appeal? I don't know if you've heard of this.
No.
It's created, I believe, by Bill Gates, or Bill Gates funded it. I'm sure it's called Appeal, and it's like a waxy film that is put over fruits to make them stay fresher for longer. So when you go to a supermarket and you'll see those shiny apples, they're not naturally like that. They've got a wax coating over, and we don't know the long-term issues with any of these chemicals or forever chemicals. You know, I mean, the film that is really worth watching is Dark Waters. I don't know if you've seen it. It's the true story about Teflon, which we all have on our pans, you know, the non-stick coating.
Some people have it on their shoulders.
A Teflon non-stick.
Yeah.
I mean, I won't tell you much more. Watch the film because it is a true story. And these chemicals are called forever chemicals. They do not go away. We all have these chemicals in our livers. Even polar bears, when they've been tested, have these forever chemicals within their liver. Babies, when they've tested I'm really not, this is not a nice subject, but yeah, the placentas contain these forever chemicals. We're swimming in chemicals, so it's really important not to overburden your body with extra chemicals like ultra processed foods.
I mean, it would be impossible to avoid them entirely, of course, but it's about understanding, I think, what you put in your body. And also, I'm sure that you do cleanses and things as well. I know for you fast, don't you? But there are also methods, again, prevention being better than cure, where you can do things to make sure that you're just cleansing your body or looking after yourself on a regular basis, so that you're not as affected by the stuff that actually we probably can't avoid.
Yeah, absolutely.
But again, you won't get any of that stuff through traditional systems. I think it's always better, if you're struggling to find what you need through traditional systems, current systems, then my view is that have a punt at something else. See what else you can connect with, what resonates with you. And if that's Wendy, great, because she can look at you, or any of her students can look at you holistically, and start to help you to work with prevention of this dis-ease, rather than having to respond reactively to stuff when it comes up.
Yeah, and I often say, patients say to me, "Oh, I wish I'd come to you." My dog is probably going to bark really quite loudly now, because there's another really, really big dog outside, and he doesn't like this dog. So if you hear barking,
That's the dog.
That's the yes.
It's the same type of dog.
It is exactly the same type of dog. So I've got a French Mastiff, and there's another French Mastiff who, funnily enough, lives dead opposite us. He's called Big Mac, and he's lovely. But he didn't bark. I'm quite impressed.
He's been very quiet,
very
hasn't he?
good boy. Yes. What was I talking about?
I don't know. I've lost it
now. Yes, I remember. So patients will say to me, "Oh, I wish I'd come to you years ago," and I think, well, yeah, it would have been easier to unpick the layers, but people come when they're ready.
That's important. Yeah, you have, like you say, you have to be ready if you're going to make dietary changes. That's a big deal. And you have to be ready. I'm 100% gluten-free and have been since the moment Wendy told me to, but I was ready for that through desperation, but I was ready for it.
I mean, I had a lady once, and I advised her to go gluten-free. She actually cried because she couldn't have a donut.
I get it. Like, I was a proper Belgian bun addict before we met.
I mean, the thing is with gluten, I mean, is it the wheat? Is it the gluten, or is it the glyphosate? I mean, that's a whole area that we can go into. The modern farming methods, these huge monocultures, how wheat is grown, how it's stored, the fact that it's routinely sprayed with a chemical pesticide to get rid of aphids and, pests, a chemical fungicide to get rid of any sort of molds, and glyphosate, which is a herbicide which would get rid of any weeds within the field. I mean, you don't see poppies in a wheat field now,
That's interesting.
And that's because of the glyphosate. Now, glyphosate is a chemical herbicide. It's actually the main ingredient in Roundup. When you see, that you see those adverts for Roundup. Well, that's glyphosate. And there is a lot of science, do go and check it out, that shows that actually it's the glyphosate residue that affects our gut microbiota, so our living organisms that live within our digestive tract. It detrimentally affects the gut microbiome, and that actually leads to what we call leaky gut. So whether it's the wheat, whether it's the farming, whether it's the mixture of all of these chemicals, you know, you can't wash these off. They're taken up and into the plant. So if you imagine most people daily are going to have some sort of toast or shredded wheat or Weetabix for breakfast. Probably lunch would be a baguette or a sandwich. And then maybe for dinner there would be some other sort of wheat-based pasta dish. So if you imagine the small micro dosage of chemicals that you're going to have in every meal over years, that's where the problem comes.
Yeah, you're right. I think you often hear, you know, everything in moderation, little and often, but I don't think that we operate in moderation. As you say, you described what is probably a very average diet of most people for the day, and it is kind of this wheat situation. That's quite normal, and traditionally, if you were having wheat from the bakers, you might not be having any response or reaction to it. And I certainly know, you know, my in-laws are Greek, and in Greece they still go to the baker to buy the bread, you know, and they still go to the greengrocers and everything else. So and actually Greece is one of the blue zones, isn't it, where people live a lot longer. And so that has always been interesting to me, because they don't really have the level of allergies to things that we seem to have here in the UK or in the States. And so that's always been really interesting to me as well from that perspective.
Yeah, and I think that's absolutely right. I think they would buy fresh produce daily.
Yeah.
You know, that they sort of shop more on a daily basis, where we do like a weekly shop.
Yeah.
And expect our bread to last a whole week. You know, whereas it shouldn't do that.
Yeah, even Alex's family, who live in a big city, still go to the baker and to the butcher and everybody else, you know, and they still do it like that on a daily basis.
Yeah, absolutely. So whether it's the gluten or the wheat, or whether it's the modern farming methods, probably a combination of both, and probably a combination of, you know, it's quick, it's easy, so people are eating far more of it. But I mean, I think it probably is a combination.
Yeah, it's the volume, isn't it? I think ultimately the volume of what we're having, and to for me particularly, but if you're going to do gluten-free, you have to reset your body, and you have to go back to that kind of absolute zero, rebuild your gut health, and then see, maybe some people could introduce it back in. I'm not going to, because I've lost all cravings for it, so I'm like, what's the point of introducing
and
it?
I mean, when I gave up gluten, I can actually remember there was a day I was in the Apothecary, and it really honestly felt like a cloud lifted. Even my eyesight seemed to clear, whereas I think before it felt foggy. But of course I hadn't noticed, because I was like that all the time. And definitely my energy levels went up really quite significantly.
That was one of the biggest issues I came to you with, was fatigue. And actually, I know I said I have never cheated with wheat with her, which I haven't, but the accidents I've had, yes, I've had vomiting, but then the next day, and for a few days after, I've become fatigued, and the weirdest thing is I just start dropping things. I can't hold on to anything.
Really?
I get really clumsy, and I was always really clumsy. It improved since cutting out gluten-free. But now, if I do have an accident, I get that. I get this clumsiness, I get the fatigue, and then the instant response is that I vomit.
Isn't that so interesting? And that's because it's affecting your nervous system.
There's that book, Grain Brain, right?
Oh, yeah, Dr. Perlmutter. You can't forget his name. Actually, you can find him on YouTube. He's got a very good YouTube channel, and he talks about the link between gluten, not only gluten grains, but grain, and mental health. And I think that's another thing I really noticed is how improved my mood was when I gave up gluten. I felt, well, there's a saying that one of my very, very wonderful herbal teachers used to say, and I'm sure he was quoting somebody else, but it was something like, bread or wheat gives the workforce enough energy to work, but not revolt.
Oh, that's interesting.
Isn't it?
That's
because
funny.
it does. I mean, I've certainly felt, I mean, it's been so many years now, but I felt dumbed down eating all of that highly processed wheat and sugar. I mean, because for me, it was the wheat in the form of cake. You know, the combination of wheat and sugar, that was my Achilles heel for sure. Definitely the sugar.
I haven't cut out the sugar yet. I'm a proper sugar addict. I haven't made that step yet. I know you've been nagging me.
You did do it though. You did really well for, I thought. Was he telling me porky pies?
I know. Yeah, I think, no, you're right. I think, I can't remember exactly, but I think you're right that at one point I did, but I'm way back with the sugar. I'm all right. Like, I'm 95% better than I was when I first met you.
Yeah, good.
Like,
good.
what improvement, eh?
But I mean, sugar is, I mean, I really interested in sugar addiction, food addiction. Oh, we've got somebody coming to say hello. Oh,
that's a waggy
his
tail.
tail. Don't knock the phone over.
Here we are.
Oh dear, he
Right.
wants to say hello.
Hello. Should we say hello?
Should we say hello, Ron?
Here, hello.
Yes.
Here he is.
He's very sweet.
Right, on that note, should we say goodbye?
Yes.
So on Friday, 7:30 p.m. is the Fareham Positive Living Group, and you can book Wendy's talk on my website. I'll pop a link in the comments, and we look forward to seeing you there.
Look forward to seeing you there.
Okay, bye.
Bye.